First of all, since we last gathered, 3 of you on stage have enjoyed victories, an unprecedented moment in the modern era. 3 separate candidates, 3 separate victories. Congratulations to you. In all 3 contests, the voters made it clear to pollsters and elsewhere, electability was a crucial element to them, a crucial argument this year. And so, Speaker Gingrich, on electability to begin with, your rival, your opponent on this stage, Governor Romney, was out today calling you erratic, a failed leader, and warning that your nomination for this party could perhaps result in what he called an October surprise a day. So, given the fact that he went after you today on this topic of electability, your response tonight, Mr. Speaker? Governor Romney, for his part, the Speaker said about you that you were dancing on eggs during this campaign, a good salesman with a weak product. And even Chris Christie, one of the most popular politicians in this country, speaking on your behalf, said this weekend your challenge is, quote, going to be how to connect with people. Same question to you about electability. To your electability, let's talk about the southern base of the GOP. Among those who describe themselves as very conservative, only 1 in 5 have gone your way. How is that going to bode well for the longer campaign? Last week, Governor, you said that you complained that too much of your time on stage lately has been spent on negativity vis-a-vis the other candidates. You pledged to spend your time going after the incumbent president, yet here we are again. You have labeled this choice as being between an erratic and a moderate. You come in here tonight with 1 victory in Iowa. Where is your path to the top here? There is no denying you have an enthusiastic base of support. We could hear them outside tonight. Yet there was that recent interview you were asked if, while campaigning, you envision yourself in the Oval Office, and you said, not really, but I think it's a possibility. So that begs the question about your path and when you will give an honest answer about perhaps your third-party plans going forward. Are you in this regardless of the outcome to your right here on this stage? Well, let me come at it this way. If Newt Gingrich emerges from the GOP primary process as the nominee of the party, do you go your own way? I should be more specific. Will you run as a third-party candidate? You support a Newt Gingrich as nominee? Speaker Gingrich, you willing to adjust to pick up an endorsement from Texas? Romney, a question you know is coming because of what you've set in motion for tomorrow when you release 1 year's tax returns and your estimates for 2011. We know it's not a matter of producing them. You said during the McCain vetting process you turned over 23 years, which you had at the ready because, to quote you, you're something of a pack rat. So prior to tomorrow, can you tell us tonight what's in there that's going to get people talking? What's in there that's going to be controversial? What's in there that you may find yourself defending? Across this country tomorrow, when people learn the details of the tax return you release, and of course you'll be under pressure to release more years after that, nothing will stick out, nothing will emerge that'll be talked about by this time tomorrow night. Speaker Gingrich, what'll satisfy you? And Governor, how about your father's model of 12 years worth of returns? Just an aside, have you been surprised at the degree to which your wealth has become an issue? You spoke rather forcefully in South Carolina over the weekend on Saturday night about this, about the degree to which you've had to defend, as you put it, your success in business. Governor Romney has said, and he said it again tonight, he expected these attacks from the other side. He's been taking fire as he would from the Democrats, from the group on this stage. That means you, that includes you.
I didn't mean to include...
No, I have not.
Just tonight, 2 hours ago, in fact, you released your 06 contract with Freddie Mac. We alluded to this earlier. Your company was paid $25,000 a month, $300,000 for the year, but it didn't provide a further explanation of services for Freddie Mac. Why 1 year's worth? Governor Romney today used the expression work product. He wants to see your work product, and the word lobbying's been thrown around, and you strongly disagree with that. Since we've been nibbling around the edges of the foreclosure crisis, since, 40% of homeowners in this state are underwater, 53% of the homes in Tampa, Florida are worth less today than before this crisis. Was it too easy? Did vehicles of the U.S. government make it too easy to own a home in America? Paul, should that be any role for the government? Are those folks owed anything for being under? Starting with Governor Romney, to help these homeowners or not? Was it overregulated prior to the collapse? Let me ask you this. There was a lot of talk in the last presidential campaign about that 3 a.m. phone call. Let's say President Romney gets that phone call, and it is to say that Fidel Castro has died. And there are credible people in the Pentagon who predict upwards of 500,000 Cubans may take that as a cue to come to the United States. What do you do? It's a practical matter along the Florida coast, though. You know the policy, so-called wet foot, dry foot. What do you do if folks start arriving in the United States? If there was a strong lobby of Chinese dissidents living in a state as politically important as Florida, do you think we'd have a trade policy with China that looks more like the trade policy with Cuba? Last night, the Abe Lincoln U.S. aircraft carrier and a couple other attendant U.S. Navy vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. If Iran was able to carry out that threat to shut down the strait, would you consider that an act of war? What would you do about it as president? Rich, if you accept that bedrock definition that it is an act of war, how do you gauge the appetite on the part of the American people after the better part of a decade of warfare, fighting dual wars overseas, for something like that? Governor Romney, how do you end a war in Afghanistan without talking to the Taliban? Go ahead. I was just going to ask, any appetite on this stage to negotiate with the Taliban? You've talked about this a lot, specifically as a last resort, as you said, taking out Iran's nuclear program. The problem with that, so many in the military tell you, is the target list. Where do you limit it? The airstrikes that some estimate would begin at 30 to 60 days sustained, taking out air defenses, all of that familiar language that the American people have just been through for a decade.
Senator Santorum, here in Florida, BP is still airing apologetic appeals on television, but there are proposals to expand offshore oil drilling. The state's most optimistic estimates say more drilling would create 5,000 jobs. But an oil spill would threaten Florida's tourism industry, which employs nearly 1 million people. Is that worth the risk? All of you favor making English the official language of the United States, which could mean that ballots and other government documents would not be available in Spanish. But Speaker Gingrich, you're sending out press releases in Spanish. Governor Romney, you're advertising in Spanish. Why is it okay for you to court voters in Spanish, but not okay for the government to serve them in Spanish? So to be clear, you would only have ballots in English. I wanted to move on to a slightly different topic, the DREAM Act, which, as you know, would provide a pathway to citizenship for children who have been brought to the U.S. illegally if they attend college or enroll in the military. Now, Governor Romney and Senator Santorum have both said they would veto this legislation. Would you do the same?
Governor Romney, there's one thing I'm confused about. You say you don't want to go and round up people and deport them, but you also say that they would have to go back to their home countries and then apply for citizenship. So if you don't deport them, how do you send them home? Self-deportation, is that a valid concept? In Iowa, you were a big supporter of ethanol subsidies. Here in Florida, sugar is a very important industry, and it's subsidized as well with import restrictions, quotas. There's a conservative movement to do away with these programs. In the case of sugar, critics say it adds billions of dollars to consumers' grocery bills every year. What would you do about that? You're getting some campaign support from sugar growers. It's a very influential group in the states. What's your view on the sugar subsidy? Yeah. Florida's Everglades provide 1 in 3 Floridians with their drinking water. It affects thousands of jobs. Right now, there's a joint federal-state program to save what's left of the Everglades. Would you commit to continuing that federal financing of the Everglades? Senator Santorum, 2005, Florida was in the middle of a huge national debate about Terri Schiavo, whether her feeding tube should be removed after the courts had ruled that she'd been in a vegetative state for years. You were at the center, at the front of advocating congressional intervention to keep her alive. You even came down here, came to her bedside after a fundraiser. Why should the government have more say in medical decisions like that than a spouse? Do not resuscitate directives, do you think they're immoral? In which, in that case, the courts had ruled repeatedly. How does that square the Terri Schiavo action with your understanding of the Constitution and the separation of powers? Well, you're a doctor. What was your view of the Terri Schiavo case?
Governor Romney, this is the state that put the first men on the moon. America right now has no way to put people into space except to hitch a ride with the Russians. Meanwhile, the Chinese are ramping up their space program. At a time when you all want to shrink federal spending, should space exploration be a priority? Speaker Gingrich, would you put more tax dollars into the space race and commit to putting an American on Mars instead of relying on the private sector? Speaker Gingrich, I have another question for you on another topic. You've talked about the millions of jobs created by the Reagan tax cuts. If tax cuts create jobs, why didn't the Bush tax cuts work?
Been called, in addition to this unprecedented primary contest the GOP is in the midst of, a battle for the soul of the Republican Party. Governor Romney, the question is about that soul, what have you done to further the cause of conservatism as a Republican leader? You've been talking a lot about conservative principles in this campaign so far. Is that enough for you? Is that good enough? What's the net effect of all this, of the tax release tomorrow, of the Freddie Mac release tonight, on your party, say, your candidacy as you try to go forward? Are these two men in the middle insufficiently conservative for you? Again tonight, so-called Romney Care and so-called Obamacare have been positioned very closely side by side by your opponent, the senator, and again, you've been called insufficiently conservative. Gingrich, I know none of you believe in polls, but as we came in here tonight, of the numbers in the known world, your numbers were on the rise. What scares you about the presidency if you made it to the job you want? You talk about restoring America's greatness. Given that, in your view, when was America last great?